Today, I want to share with you some of my all-time favorite books on personal finance, making money, investing, and general personal development or self-improvement. Now, make sure you stick around to the end because I'm going to share some books on my personal to-be-read list that I'm excited to read this year, especially in light of what's currently happening in the market and the world at large. With that being said, let's start with general personal finance. And our first book is The Psychology of Money from Morgan Housel. This is hands down my #1 recommendation when it comes to personal finance. Morgan Housel does such an amazing job writing in a really compelling way and filling it with lots of stories that really help you remember the main takeaways. One of my favorite sections was all about how the time in which you are born, and especially what's happening in the market and the world at large, certainly in your country during your coming of age years, has a massive shaping on the way that you think about money, inflation, debt, and investing for the rest of your life. Even though you might learn lessons later on in life about some of these things, what was happening at the time that you were transitioning from being a kid to being an adult and entering the workforce, that time period has a major impact on the way that you think about money forever. It really got me starting to question, well, what was happening in the world when I was graduating high school in 2011 and then graduating college in 2014 and starting to enter the workforce? And how might that be impacting my own feelings as it relates to debt, investing, and risk management, or my personal finances in general? If you want to get good with money, you need to understand the psychological side of it. That brings us to our next book, which is I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. This is probably one of my favorite general personal finance books, especially if you are brand new to finance. Ramit does such a phenomenal job explaining all these different little bitty areas that are important. He touches on credit scores and credit cards, different bank accounts that you might use and when to use them, how to budget, how to get started investing, how to make a debt pay down plan, even touches a little bit on insurance and long-term planning. It basically has it all. It's the best general intro to personal finance that I could recommend. Now we're gonna move on to self-improvement or mindset type books. Our first one is gonna be Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. Even though this is really a leadership book and is mostly about how to lead a team and work well with others and build good relationships, I think that there's a ton in here that can apply to your personal life as well. Now, the book is co-authored by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. They're two retired US Navy SEALs that have turned all their military experience into leadership and business consulting. And what's really interesting about this book is the way that it's structured. They basically take each different chapter as a separate leadership principle, and each chapter opens up with a story from their time in Iraq, how a leadership principle either wasn't implemented and the fallout from that, or how it was implemented and how it worked. Then they move into deep diving on the principle itself, and then they share a story about that principle applied to normal, everyday business life that you and I, who are non-military, are likely more familiar with. You might think that this is an odd recommendation to share in a video about financial books, but I would totally disagree. So many of these principles in this book, if you apply them to your personal life and especially to your money, are going to help you significantly improve your financial situation. So I actually highly recommend this book, no matter what area of your life you're trying to improve. Similar to what we talked about with the Morgan Housel book, money is not math. Money is emotional stuff that's all wrapped up in what it means to be a human. And this book is about basically how to lead well, take care of yourself, and improve yourself as a human. Because of that, it applies to your money as well. All right, next on our list is Essentialism by Greg McKeown. This book is incredibly important, especially for people who are highly ambitious in their careers or in their businesses, trying to do a lot, make a lot of things happen, get a lot of things done. I would say that it's incredibly important for you to read something like this and help you sort of take a step back and really focus in on what truly are the most important things. It's all about asking yourself a series of questions to help you drill down on how you can best use your resources, time and money, to do the things that truly are the most important to you. So next we have our last book in the self-improvement sort of mindset section. And this book, funny enough, is called Mindset by Carol Dweck. So I'll be honest, a lot of mindset stuff to me at first sounds really gimmicky, like even the subtitle of this book, right? The New Psychology of Success, How We Can Learn to Fulfill Our Potential. However, I would really encourage you to sort of set that to the side for a second and just give this book a real chance. The sort of core philosophy behind this book is that most people tend to have either a fixed or a growth mindset. And if you want to do something different, if you want to be not average, if you want to live a life truly that you enjoy and dream about, then you need to be able to have a growth mindset. You need to first believe that you can actually achieve those things. Basically, if you've ever caught yourself saying, I don't think I could do that, or that's not for me, or I can't really do that. Yes, other people, they can do that kind of stuff. I can't do that. You need to read this book. And speaking of believing that you can actually do things that maybe you didn't previously believe were possible, we're gonna move on to books about making money or starting a business. Our first one is The Money Tree by Chris Guillebeau. I've been reading Chris's books since I was 18. I'm a huge fan of the work that he puts out into the world, and they certainly have impacted me in a lot of ways. This is his most recent book, came out a couple of years ago, and again, it's very story-based, which makes it really fun to read while you're also learning stuff. It's about a guy named Jake whose personal finances are a total wreck. He's buried in debt up to his eyeballs, and luckily he meets some mentors that actually start helping him understand that creating a business, a money tree, so to speak, in your backyard actually isn't as hard and doesn't have to be as difficult as you might think. If you've ever been even slightly interested in starting your own business or trying to make extra money on the side, I think this book is a great place to start. You will then want to read this one, which is The E-Myth Revisited. Now, I'm gonna be honest, this is kind of goofy, but when I first heard about this book and saw it recommended a lot, I thought that E stood for electronic, like email, and that this book was like about the internet or something, like myths about the internet, and I literally just dismissed the whole book. I know that's kind of stupid, but if I'd have just researched it for 2 seconds, you would realize that the E stands for entrepreneur. So it's the entrepreneur myth. This is, again, another book that is very story or narrative driven, which I love, and makes it a lot more fun to learn stuff. The kind of core takeaway from this book is that most people who go to start their own small business to try and make extra money on the side don't end up starting a business. They basically end up creating a job for themselves. They typically take whatever skill that they've been using in their career and they just start freelancing or consulting with that skill. And they create basically an hourly job for them to do that they own. But it doesn't actually end up creating the freedom and the money that they oftentimes went into business for. This book does a great job of explaining why it's so important to really think through how you're building your business, the systems and processes that you're using to actually create the desired freedom that you're going after. That brings us to the last book in our section on making money and business building. And this one is maybe a bit of an odd choice, but it's The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. Now, I say it's an odd choice because it basically takes a bunch of tweets and sound bites from interviews that Naval has done and puts them together in a somewhat cohesive manner and then tries to expound on those concepts. It's sort of a interesting conglomeration of all these little bitty things that Naval has said and have been popularized and tries to put it in a more structured format. Now, if you're not familiar with Naval Ravikant, he's sort of a startup founder, entrepreneur, business builder, turned investor, turned tweet philosopher person, if you will. He went viral on Twitter a few years back by putting out this massive tweet storm called How to Get Rich Without Getting Lucky. That is phenomenal. And if you have not seen that tweet storm, you should go listen to the podcast episode on Naval's podcast called How to Get Rich. This is a really, really phenomenal book, and it helped open my eyes up to ways of thinking about building wealth that I hadn't previously thought about. I think this is an incredible book for thinking outside the box, building real wealth. And the reason that I put it in this section of making extra money and building a business is because that does tend to be a sort of core part of his philosophy, is that even if you're not going to build a business, you do need to take the money that you're making from your job and invest and own assets that then help generate more money for you. All right, so that brings us to our group on investing. The first one that I'm gonna recommend is the Boglehead's Guide to Investing. If you're new to just understanding the basics of what a stock or a bond is and the difference between an actively traded mutual fund versus an index fund and what an expense ratio is, this is a great book to get you started. It's written in a very easy to understand, sort of bite-sized, approachable way, and can also help you think about how to plan for the long term and how much you should be investing to be on track for retirement. The book is based on the philosophies or investment strategy of John Bogle, which is the founder of Vanguard, a small brokerage you may have heard of. And again, it does a great job really helping you understand how you can make investing easy for the everyday person. So next on our list is The Lifestyle Investor by Justin Donald. And I'm purposely recommending this book right after the Bogleheads book, because actually literally in the first couple chapters of this book, he exactly points out how he does not endorse pretty much everything that this book stands for. And it's sort of, to me, very helpful to read conflicting approaches, especially when there's some good nuggets of wisdom in both. I definitely don't agree with everything in this book, and there are a few sections that start to get a little bit salesy to me. However, there's a number of sort of foundational points that he builds his investing philosophy on that I think are really, really good. I love the way that this book is structured. He opens up explaining how he's come up with basically 10 core commandments or rules that he personally follows for every investment that he makes. It's almost like creating your own little personal operating system for how to think about using your money. I loved that concept as a whole, and even though I didn't love every single one of his 10 commandments, it helped me think about what my commandments would be for my investing style. I don't think that this book should be read in a vacuum, but I think it's a fantastic book to pair with other investing books that you might read. So next on our list, still about investing, but this time about a specific type of investing, which is real estate investing. This book is called Retire Early with Real Estate by Chad Carson. If you've been watching this channel, you know that I actually just had Chad on a few videos back. Chad is the man when it comes to real estate. He owns a ton of units, has a ton of experience, has been doing it since he was fresh out of college, and really, really knows his stuff. If you're kind of interested in real estate investing, but you don't know where to start, this is the place for you. He goes through most of the popular real estate investing strategies, explains some different pros and cons of each one, and more importantly, explains some basic calculations for how you can be thinking about how much you might need to save to invest, how much real estate you might need to own in order to retire early, or just retire on time, however you want to think about it. Now, next on my list, also in the real estate investing category, is Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Wealth by Avery Carl. You can see this book is really short, just like short-term rentals, and it's a really, really great overview if that's something you're interested in doing. Now, short-term rentals is a very specific strategy when it comes to real estate, right? This is owning a property and using Airbnb or VRBO to primarily rent to vacationers or business travelers. This book does a great job of helping you understand the tactical, sort of technical, how to analyze a property, how to think about the math behind the property, and also some tips for how to manage it, even if you're doing it remotely. Maybe you live in one area of the country, but you're buying in a totally different market and using a remote team to help you clean it and handle maintenance items and all of that kind of stuff. Does a great job on both of those fronts when it comes to short-term rentals. Now that brings us to the last book in our investing group, which is The Internet of Money by Andreas Antonopoulos. This book is really about Bitcoin and crypto and everything happening on the blockchain. And honestly, I think this is probably one of the best introductions to this whole topic that is obviously taking the world by storm right now. This book is basically a collection of talks that he has given over the last decade or so, all about Bitcoin, the future of money, the internet, and how all of this sort of comes together to really transform the way our current financial system works. Unfortunately, there is a ton of hype in the cryptocurrency space right now, and a lot of people that are very standoffish towards it because of that hype, and rightfully so. Seems like every other week there's some brand new token that's supposed to be going to the moon and we're all gonna get super rich off of it, but then something happens and rugs get pulled and people lose lots of money. This book is none of that. If you're interested in looking for real world applications of cryptocurrency, this book is a great place to start. Now, that brings us to the end of the section of the books that I'm recommending. Next, we have a few books that I'm excited to read this year. The first one is Financial Services Revolution. Like I said, I'm learning a lot right now about crypto and the future of money. And this book basically does a great job, or I think it's supposed to do a great job, of mapping out how blockchain technology could disrupt all these different aspects of financial services. Because I make videos about money, my whole business is about managing money, I would like to be on the cusp of this new sort of technical cryptocurrency frontier, if you will. The next book we have is a book on investing as well, but this time it is rental property. Again, it is The Big Book on Rental Property Investing by Brandon Turner. Now, Brandon is not really a friend because I just barely know him, but I did get a chance to meet Brandon and hang out with him at a conference a few years back. He's somebody that I really respect and am excited to learn from. You can kind of see that I'm somewhat pulling from different ends of the spectrum here when it comes to my own investments, right? I'm learning a lot about cryptocurrency and digital money and sort of the future of that space, while also trying to find ways to invest in real physical houses, right? I'm trying to sort of diversify in that way. So I'm currently learning about both of those areas. All right, now the next book on my list is called The Courage to Be Disliked. And honestly, I don't know much about this book, other than it comes highly recommended from a few people that I respect. I think it's kind of a mixture of mindset and philosophy, but again, I really don't know. I am, however, intrigued by the topic, especially in our current age of cancel culture and totally just pushing out and aside anybody who disagrees with you on any even minor thing. I think this is especially important for people like me who put out content on the internet, and invariably I'm bound to disagree with somebody and make someone out there dislike me. So the topic to me is very intriguing because I want to put out my honest thoughts. I want to try and be transparent, and I want to try and be open about what I believe and what I stand for. And I want to have courage to stand in the face of people disliking whatever it is that I have to say. The next one on my list, also not exactly financial, but I think it may have some financial implications, is called The Storm Before the Storm. It's all about the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. I don't know much about this book, but I am trying to widen my range of reading right now to include a lot more history. I'm really interested right now in learning about especially great nations, how they rise and ultimately how they fall. Like America, we've been, on top for a little while now. And it seems like certainly when I was growing up that there was no way that America would ever be in any other position than, being a great power, being at the top. But, Rome was once that way as well. I'm not putting on my tinfoil hat and saying that America's doomed for failure, but odds are that over many hundreds of years, eventually, America will fall just like every other great nation or power in the whole history of the world. So I'm curious as to what that looks like. What are the signs? What things are happening right before a great power comes to power, and then during that reign, and then before they ultimately fall. So really excited to check this book out. Next, we have probably what is going to be my most ambitious book this year, which is The Theory of Incentives. This book, honestly, I'm a little scared. You can see it's like got a lot of formulas in here. Basically, though, this book is sort of an economics textbook all about human incentives and basically how to design a system to incentivize the right things. After learning more about incentives in general and listening to the Freakonomics podcast and reading more about what happens when you incentivize the wrong thing, I just got really interested in this topic because it really overlays perfectly with finance and how people manage their money, because we tend to spend our money, manage it, and invest it in a certain way that aligns with however we are internally incentivized, even if we don't think about those incentives on the surface. The book says that basically it concerns itself with the central question of what makes people act in a particular way in an economic or business situation. I'm really excited to read this book and kind of approach it not from a more general self-helpy, watered down narrative, but really to dig into the details and understand some of the core theory underlying incentive design. And that brings us to Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Now, this book has been incredibly popular in the last few years. It's all about negotiation, and you're learning it from this guy named Chris, who is a former FBI hostage negotiator. Even though I haven't done a ton of negotiating in my life, I'm finding myself in situations more and more these days where every now and again I do need to negotiate something. I've heard nothing but raving reviews about this book. Everybody says it's a great mixture of very good tactical information on how to negotiate, but also is incredibly entertaining and interesting because of some of the behind the scenes stories that this guy gives you as a hostage negotiator. I think this book is going to be able to pair really well with maybe one of the more intense books like The Theory of Incentives. Now, if you like this video, you'll want to be sure and check out this video right here about the 6 books that have changed my life. And I would love to know what you're reading this year. So leave me a comment down below and tell me what books you're most excited about.